Hi, hello, and welcome to my channel, Rosie Red Panda. So today I wanted to draw and paint some groundhogs. I wanted to do this in time for Groundhog Day, but obviously I've overshot the timing. It was at the beginning of last month. But hey, we've moved on. It's now in March, and now that the flowers are out, I'm feeling so thankful that I'm not reliving the same day over and over and over again. I had so much fun with this sketchbook page. I wanted to draw a bunch of references so that I can try and figure out how a groundhog looks, because they're quite rodenty, but not like a mouse, more like a beaver kind of rodenty. So it was hard to draw their snouts. They're quite square and have shallow little triangle noses that are really sweet. And I lent into the narratives because some of them had open mouth expressions, some of them looked angry, some of them looked mysterious, and so I just gave them little things that I think would suit their characters. So this guy, once I drew the eyeballs, he looked hungry. He looked like he was craving pizza, and I was craving the cold pizza sat in my fridge because cold pizza is a lot better than warm pizza. I enjoy it a lot more. And so that's why he's holding a pizza. Or maybe a camper dropped it on a trail and he picked it up and he's about to have the most amazing bit of food in his life, because groundhogs usually eat a variety of plant matter. So grasses, leaves, bark, fruits, vegetables, and they occasionally eat insects and bird eggs. So maybe he went on a trip to Italy and it changed his life, and now he's trying to bring home some culture. Maybe he got too inspired and decided to come back and build his own pizza oven outside of his burrow, and his children are just there complaining, like,
Dad, why do we have to have pizza for breakfast, lunch, and dinner? Why can't we just go back to box and leaves?
and the dad is just consumed with his love for pizza. This is what I mean by I got lost in the narratives. I got too invested in their stories, but they're just really cute, and I love making stories. I would love to make my own little animal village one day, or like little world where they just can all interact in some way, or they all have different stories and jobs. Speaking of jobs, the groundhog I'm currently sketching looks really suspicious of people. He looks really mysterious as well, like he's trying to hide a secret. So I gave him a briefcase, and he works for the animal version of MI6, and there is some mission that he needs to take deep in the burrows, and he has a special key to get into some special little tunnels, and he's about to crack a case wide open. Maybe it's to do with the reference I'm drawing now. I wanted a full body reference because I had one above, but I missed out the tail, and I thought the feet were too hard to draw, so I hid it in grass, which is what I did for a few of them. Classic artist trick. I love it. And especially with animals, is I always use grass or trees or something, depending on if I'm not enjoying the feet or the hands. But I'm trying my best here. I mean, groundhog feet are really toey. There's a lot of toe in their feet. I did try to make them look cute, but they are feet. But yeah, for the reference photo, I thought it looked quite prim and proper and pristine, so I decided to make her into a princess or a queen. She has a crystal crown. I debated on whether giving her a robe or a cape, I'm not sure which one it is, was a good idea, but I don't think she would wear it unless for special occasions or for her coronation, because she looks quite prim and proper, and I don't think she's getting her paws muddy, let alone letting her beautiful royal clothing drag along the muddy ground. But maybe it links back to the briefcase groundhog because she's had some crown jewels stolen, or maybe she has a diamond sculpture of a tree in her royal gardens, and someone has come along and snapped some twigs off to make some money and stashed it away somewhere. And maybe the pizza loving groundhog discovers them when he's digging up his pizza oven and trying to make a pizza, and he just stumbles across these diamond twigs. Would he give it back? I think he would. I think he looks like a kind little groundhog. I think he'd probably lean towards the side of justice. And this next groundhog is the embodiment of justice. They are a lollipop person. And I used to have a lollipop man in the village I grew up in, and they basically control the well, they don't control the traffic. They stop cars and let cars start again. They are human traffic lights, and they work specifically outside of schools to prevent children from getting run over, and they are either the loveliest people you'll ever meet, and they sometimes do carry around real lollipops, or they are tyrants of the law. They are so strict and vicious sometimes. But I mean, most of the time they're so lovely and jolly and friendly, and they have saved loads of lives, and it is lovely to see them, and it's just a really lovely community thing. But I decided to draw this groundhog. He's very serious. He's taking his job very, very seriously, and you should. You should with this kind of career. And yeah, this idea came to me because I think the groundhog was yawning or maybe screaming. I don't know if it's a territorial call or anything, but yeah, I should make a Pinterest board with all my references so that I can look back at them and see where the ideas maybe came from. But yeah, this one is an actual reference. I'm covering the paws with grass again because I didn't feel like drawing them. And it's a classic pose because I wanted to try and get one with more movement and actually show the physique of a groundhog, hopefully accurately. And I love the way they walk. I think it's really sweet. And I've got a fact. I did not know this, but groundhogs are also known as woodchucks. You know the tongue twister? How much wood could a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? I can't believe it. I think that's the first time I've ever done it all the way through without stuttering. And the groundhog in the top right corner, I wanted to make him have an outfit that reflected the outfits I saw officials wear on Groundhog Day. And I thought that I could tell a little bit about the history because I didn't really know anything about Groundhog Day apart from it was a celebration in America and it turned into a movie. Let's start with the dates. Groundhog Day happens on the 2nd of February every year, and thousands of people gather in, I'm going to have to double check how to pronounce this town. Okay, let me spell it out. Punxsutawney, in Pennsylvania, and people gather to see the famous groundhog, Punxsutawney. This is so hard, hang on. Phil. His name's Phil. And they gather to see if Phil will see his own shadow. And this quirky little tradition has been celebrated since 1887, and it makes it one of the longest running weather predicting systems in the United States. It's not a reliable system at all, or I don't know for 100%. Maybe they predict the weather in their own animal way, or maybe it's just a fun tradition. It sounds really fun. I really would love to go to it one day. I drew this groundhog holding a little bell pepper in the end. You'll see when I colour it in red, but they eat fruit and vegetables, and I think a bell pepper is a fruit because the seeds are on the inside, I think. Don't fact check me on that. But I thought I would talk a little bit about what a groundhog is. So their Latin name is Marmota monax, and it comes from the French marmot, and that comes from a longer word and then Latin word, but in short, in Latin, it means mountain mouse, which it really does identify what they are. They are little mountain mice. But I have now come to the end of my sketches, and I think I love the briefcase and the lollipop man and the little expressions of them. I think out of all of them though, my favourite is the groundhog with the top hat because it represents what Groundhog Day is. And now I'm going to get into colouring them. So to be completely honest, and not to toot my own horn at all, I just am really proud of this drawing, this colouring in that I'm doing right now. I struggle with coloured pencils and watercolour, and I've never actually been really properly proud or think I've done a good technique before, but I wanted to make this into a time lapse because I think that I actually made it look like fur. Like it looked how I wanted it to look for the first time ever, and I decided to make it into quite a long time lapse to show how I layered the different colours, and especially like with the shadows and the highlights, so that I could look back at it in the future and remember how I did it and hopefully try and recreate it. because I made it look kind of soft. I think what went really well is that I did lights first and then went in with the darks and tried to highlight tufts of fur rather than trying to do each individual hair. I made it into more little tuft areas and little areas of highlights, and that worked really well. So it didn't look wiry, it looked soft. But the thing that worked the absolute best and made it all come together was a white or cream colour pencil at the end that blended everything softly to make it not, the lines not as harsh, and hopefully made it all look like actual fur. And I really enjoyed doing this. It was really fun. I'm starting to learn how to use colour pencils in a way that doesn't make it look like I've just thrown some crayon on there. And I think working from light to darks really helped this time. I do the opposite with gouache. And yeah, blabbing a bit, but I really enjoyed it. That's why I've kept the whole time lapse in, so that I can look back at it in the future and try to recreate it. And also something that I've liked to do in my sketches now, I outline in the colour that the animal is. So instead of doing a pen outline or a harsh black outline, I outlined with a dark brown so that it kept the same sort of colours and it didn't look as harsh. And I'm really liking how that looks. It didn't work too well for the watercolour because the colours were a lot lighter, but for this drawing specifically, it worked quite nicely, I think, hopefully. And I made sure to put dark colours in the shadows, so under his neck and around his belly, and yeah. Hopefully that helps someone, or just helps me in the future. And yeah, I'll stop rambling. Let me bring it back to Phil and the borough in Pennsylvania in America where he is from that I cannot pronounce properly. And let's talk about the history. This tradition traces back to an old festival from somewhere in Europe, particularly in France, England, and Germany. The festival was called Candlemas. It was celebrated halfway between the winter solstice and the spring equinox, and was a day when people would observe the weather to predict how much longer winter would last. I mean, it's a bit of a stretch for a festival. Sounds like someone just wanted to celebrate at the time, and somebody suggested, oh, maybe we can celebrate the weather. Like, maybe it was some child in a towns meeting that suggested it, and there was a huge towns meeting saying, oh, we're suffering this winter and we need something to celebrate halfway in between. And a little child popped up from nowhere and was like,
Ooh, I've got an idea. How about we celebrate the weather?
and I'll put a filter on it so it sounds more high pitched. And they went, yes, that sounds a good idea. What kind of weather, Jimmy?
Whatever kind of weather it is next Tuesday.
Yes, that's a great idea. Huzzah! And someone, it's so silly. That's not what happened. I just made that up on the spot. That's why it was so terrible. But somebody did actually make a saying for Candlemas, and it went, I'll put on the filter in Jimmy's voice again, because it sounds like he would have been the one who made it up.
If Candlemas be fair and bright, winter will have another flight. If Candlemas be clouds and rain, winter is gone and will not come again.
I mean, it's really sweet, and I really hope it's true, because that is a great saying. It would have been a good song. I can imagine a bunch of people singing that around a candle. In Germany, people took this superstition a step further. They elevated it into something more interesting to watch. They would wait outside of the houses of hedgehogs and badgers. If the animal emerged from its burrow and saw its own shadow, it meant there would be 6 more weeks of cold weather. Which, I'm not sure how they determined that, because how do they know if the badger or hedgehog has seen their own shadow? It's probably a complete accident, or maybe they did. Maybe they did. But if there was no shadow, or the animals didn't see their shadow, then it meant that spring was on its way. And when German immigrants came to America, they brought this tradition with them, but since hedgehogs weren't native to the region, they chose a much more common animal, the groundhog, or the woodchuck, and so Groundhog Day was born. So, back to Phil, the most famous groundhog. Nobody really knows why he was named Phil, but this groundhog is the stuff of legends. According to local myth, Punxsutawney Phil is over 130 years old and has been predicting the weather since 1887. The story goes that he drinks a magical elixir of life every summer, which extends his lifespan for another 7 years. Real groundhogs only live 3 to 6 years in the wild, so the current Phil is probably Phil 40 or 50. Since Punxsutawney Phil became famous, many other towns have adopted their own weather predicting groundhogs, some with similar names, including Staten Island Chuck in New York, Wyerton Willie in Canada, Buckeye Chuck in Ohio, and Birmingham Bill in Alabama, or in American, Birmingham Bill. That's a mix there. According to tradition, if Phil sees his own shadow, it means 6 more weeks of winter. If he doesn't, we get an early spring. But Phil's accuracy is only about 39%, so I don't know. Phil isn't the best weatherman. Definitely the cutest though. I don't know if this tradition is 100% serious, or if everyone knows that it's a bit of fun, but the more research I've done, I've got 2 conclusions that kind of make a little bit more sense. If Phil sees his shadow, it's probably a sunny day. If Phil doesn't see his shadow, it might not be his fault. It might just be a really cloudy day. I feel like I need to give Phil a bit more of a break. So, what actually happens on Groundhog Day in modern times? Well, early in the morning, people gather at a place called Gobbler's Knob, and members of the inner circle, a group of people wearing top hats and formal attire, perform the ceremony. And when the groundhog emerges, Phil is presented to the crowd, and to be fair, he usually looks quite comfortable with his handlers, which is nice to see. And thousands of people gather to witness the event, despite the fact that it's usually freezing cold, and there are often festivals, music, and media coverage. It's almost always in the news, which is awesome. And it just sounds like a really lovely tradition. I would love to go one day. Now I want to talk about some really cool facts about groundhogs. Let's talk about hibernation first. So, hibernation is a survival strategy that animals use to endure cold temperatures and food scarcity. Lots of mammals do it. Bears, they actually enter a state of torpor, which is a light form of dormancy where they occasionally wake up. It's more like sleeping, like really, really deep sleep. But groundhogs undergo true hibernation. Their body temperature drops from about 37 degrees centigrade to as low as 3 degrees centigrade. That's 99 degrees Fahrenheit to 37 degrees Fahrenheit. That's nearly reaching freezing levels. Their heart rate slows dramatically from 80 beats per minute to just 5 beats per minute, and their breathing becomes incredibly shallow, so dropping from 16 breaths per minute to only 2 to 4 breaths per minute, which is absolutely insane. They survive completely on fat reserves that they built up during the summer and autumn. During hibernation, groundhogs do wake up occasionally, but only briefly. Scientists study their hibernation patterns to learn more about metabolism, which could have applications in space travel and medicine, such as developing treatments for strokes or heart attacks. So, really interesting, really fascinating creatures. What I find most interesting about groundhogs are their teeth. Groundhogs belong to the rodent family and have a set of large chisel-like incisors in the front of their mouths, and these incisors grow continuously at a rate of about 1.5 millimeters or a 1/16 of an inch per week. And the reason they don't grow massive is because groundhogs constantly gnaw on tough plant materials, so wood, and they've even been seen gnawing on human-made structures like fences and garden decorations. At the back of their mouths, they have flat molars, which are used to grind leaves, grasses, and soft plant material. So they've got sharp incisors at the front to cut things with, and then their teeth at the back, their molars, grind it all together to then be able to be swallowed and eaten. They're also incredible burrowers, so they have really strong claws and really muscular limbs that they use to create complex underground tunnel systems known as burrows. These burrows can be as long as 20 metres or 66 feet, with multiple tunnels and escape routes. Each burrow consists of a main living chamber, a nesting area, and a separate bathroom chamber for waste. It's amazing! And we're now at the end of the video. I really like the expressions. I think the pencil worked better than the watercolour, but it was fun experimenting. That's why I've left the top right groundhog with the top hat blank so that I can experiment before I make a final piece or sticker. We'll see. Thank you so much for watching and see you again soon. Bye!